Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Jess and today we are going to be making caramelized onions. Now this is an easy recipe, but it does require one thing: patience. We're going to be cooking low and slow, which is how you get the beautiful caramelization of the onions. Trust me, it's worth the wait. Take your onion and a sharp knife and cut the onion in half. Then you're going to cut off the root end of your onion. I like to cut the other end as well. Once your onion is cut in half and you have the ends cut off, you're going to want to peel it. Sometimes I'll take the first layer off. You can see here, there's a little bit of a membrane. If that gets left behind, just peel it off. Peel your onion. Now, when you cut your onions, you're going to want to cut them pole to pole. You don't want to cut them across because that's going to make a weaker piece of onion and it could lead to mushy caramelized onions. You're going to cut your onions into slices that are 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch thick. When you get to the center, rotate the onion so it's easier to cut. Repeat this for your second onion, making sure to rotate again at the center, and do this process for your remaining onions. I have 3 sliced onions here that are ready to be made into caramelized onions. So the first thing you want to do is put your pan over medium heat. I really like using cast iron because it heats evenly and that leads to even cooking, which is great for a recipe like these caramelized onions where you're going to need to be cooking it for a long amount of time and you want the temperature to stay the same. If you don't have a cast iron pan, you can use any skillet. You just want to make sure that it has enough height to accommodate for the amount of onions that you're using for this recipe. Add your oil. I'm using 3 tablespoons of oil because I used 3 onions. You can adjust it for however many onions you're using. I like to use a neutral oil because it has a little bit of a higher smoke point than something like olive oil. It's the same thing with butter. You wouldn't want to use regular butter if you were cooking these, but it would be okay to use something like clarified butter, which has a higher smoke point. Some good neutral oils that you could use are avocado oil or canola oil. I went with canola oil in this case. You're going to want to add all of your onions. I know this looks like a lot of onions, but they will cook down as we caramelize them. I press the onions down with a spatula so that they can make contact with the bottom of the pan. One of the mistakes that people often make with caramelized onions is stirring them too frequently. This is the hard part, but you do have to leave them alone. What causes the caramelization is the contact with the pan, and if they don't have time to be in contact with the pan, they're not going to caramelize. Leave them for a few minutes, and then you can stir them. I generally stir them every 3 to 5 minutes. In the beginning, you have a low chance of burning your onions as long as it's over a medium heat and you're using enough oil. But as they continue cooking, they caramelize more quickly, so you really do have to keep an eye on them once they start browning. As I said before, this does take a significant amount of time. It took me probably about an hour and 10 minutes to make this recipe, but it really is worth it. This is the end result, and it is fantastic. I love it on burgers, on steaks. Really, you can add it to anything and it tastes great. Another thing that can help with even caramelization is cutting even slices of your onions. You don't have to be too precious about it, but if you have evenly sliced onions, they will caramelize more evenly. When I was stirring my onions, I noticed I had a few pieces that were bigger than the others, so I just took them out, cut them, and added them back in. When your onions start to become translucent and soft, turn down the heat just a little bit. I normally have mine between medium and medium low. You still want to hear the onions sizzling. You've just lowered the heat a little bit. This happened for me at around the 17-minute mark. At first, they're going to release a lot of moisture. This will steam them a little bit, but don't worry, as we continue to cook them, they will get that beautiful brown color. As you're stirring them, look for any signs of browning. If you see blackening of the fond in the pan or the onions, your heat is up too high and that's a signal to turn it down. But if you just see nice caramelization and browning, you're on the right track. These are the onions after 40 minutes. You can see the onions are starting to caramelize a little bit now. These are the onions after 50 minutes. After I stir the onions, I always press them back down with my spatula making sure that they're in an even layer making contact with the bottom of the pan. You can see here I have some caramelization on the onions. This is great. We're going in the right direction. What I like to do is take my spatula and rub it across the bottom of the pan. This gets up the bits that are stuck on, which are called fond, and that has a lot of flavor in it, so you want to make sure that you incorporate that back into the onions. This is after an hour of cooking. When you're moving the onions around, you want to make sure that they all get even contact with the bottom of the pan. So sometimes what I do is I stir them, while other times I'll flip them over if I see that some pieces are looking lighter than others, just to make sure that the caramelization is even. It does take a while for the onions to start to caramelize, but once they start caramelizing, you really want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on them because they will caramelize more and more quickly, and you definitely don't want them to burn, especially after spending so much time on them. When the onions start to caramelize more quickly, I'm stirring them every 1 to 2 minutes. I go by the sound of the sizzling. When it starts making a brighter, more popping sound, then I know they need to be stirred. This is an hour and 10 minutes. This is an optional step, but I like to add a splash of balsamic vinegar just to deglaze the pan. Now, as I've been turning the onions, I have been scraping up the fond from the pan, but this is a way just to get all of that and put it back into the onions. I like to season my caramelized onions at the end with salt. If you season them at the end as opposed to the beginning, you really have control over how much salt is in them, and you can season them according to your taste. The onions are looking amazing. I'm ready to take them off the heat. What I like to do is use a silicone handle cover to tilt the cast iron pan at an angle to drain off some of the excess oil. And then using my spatula, I push the caramelized onions to one side. It only takes about a minute or so for the oil to drain. And then using my spatula, I remove the onions. This is the final product. I know it probably doesn't look as good on film as it does in person, but I promise you, these are delightful. If you like cooking with cast iron or you'd like to learn more about cooking with cast iron, make sure to hit that subscribe button because I plan on doing a lot more videos about cooking with cast iron. It's one of my favorite ways to cook. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed learning how to caramelize onions. And if you want another really easy recipe that packs a lot of flavor, make sure to check out my video on how to roast garlic. If you want printable instructions and step-by-step photos for this recipe, they're linked in the description box below. I'll see you in the next video.